Emily Carter had spent 3 hours cleaning her house before Daniel arrived. She had vacuumed the living room twice. She wiped the kitchen counters until they shone. She rearranged the pillows on the couch. She folded the blanket on the armrest, unfolded it, then folded it again. She even moved a small vase of flowers from the dining table to the kitchen counter because she suddenly decided it looked better there. Then she stood in the middle of the living room and stared around. Everything looked perfect. Yet Emily didn't feel perfect. Her hands were cold. Her heart was beating too quickly. She glanced at the clock. Daniel would be there in 15 minutes. She walked into the bathroom and looked at herself in the mirror. "Relax," she whispered. But she couldn't. This wasn't just a dinner. It was the first time she was inviting Daniel into her home. And somehow that felt more personal than any restaurant date they'd had. For the past 6 weeks, Daniel had seen the version of Emily she carefully presented to the world. The woman who laughed at the right moments. The woman who dressed neatly. The woman who listened more than she spoke. The woman who rarely complained. But tonight, he was going to see where she actually lived. And Emily was terrified he would judge her. Her house wasn't terrible. It was actually comfortable. But it wasn't the kind of house she thought a successful woman in her late 30s was supposed to have. The kitchen cabinets were older. The couch had been purchased secondhand. The dining table had a small scratch near one corner. There were books stacked on the coffee table. A few plants sat near the windows. Photographs covered one wall. Nothing matched perfectly. And Emily had spent years believing that meant something was wrong with her. Her former husband Mark had taught her that. Mark cared about appearances. Everything had to look expensive. Everything had to be controlled. Whenever someone visited, Emily would spend hours preparing. If a pillow wasn't straight, he'd notice. If a dish was left in the sink, he'd notice. If the bathroom wasn't spotless, he'd mention it. If someone complimented the house, he'd smile proudly. If someone criticized it, Emily somehow became responsible. For 7 years, she had lived that way. 7 years of believing that keeping a house perfect was the same thing as being a good wife. 7 years of apologizing. 7 years of wondering whether she was enough. Then came the divorce, and with it came a tiny house that belonged entirely to her. At first, Emily hated the place. It was too quiet, too small, too empty. But slowly, something changed. She began buying things because she liked them, not because someone else approved. She bought a yellow blanket simply because the color made her happy. She put photographs of her family on the refrigerator. She planted herbs in little pots. She bought mismatched coffee mugs. She put books wherever she wanted. For the first time in years, she was creating a home instead of maintaining an image. Still, old fears were difficult to erase. The doorbell rang. Emily froze. She looked at the clock. 7 o'clock exactly. She took a breath. Then another. She opened the door. Daniel stood on the porch holding a small paper bag. "Hi." Emily smiled. "Hi. I brought dessert." "You didn't have to." "I know." She stepped aside. "Come in." Daniel walked through the doorway. Emily watched his face. That was the mistake she always made. She watched. Waiting. Searching. Looking for judgment. Daniel looked around. Emily's heart sank. She was certain he was noticing everything wrong. The old couch. The small kitchen. The scratched table. The slightly crooked picture frame. Then Daniel smiled. "This smells amazing." Emily blinked. "Really?" "Yeah, what are you cooking?" "Chicken. I love chicken." She laughed nervously. "Good." Daniel walked farther into the room. He looked at the photographs on the wall. He stopped at one. "Is that your grandmother?" Emily's expression softened. "Yes. She looks like she was fun." "She was." Daniel smiled. "I can tell." Emily looked at him. "How? Look at the way you're looking at her picture." Emily didn't know what to say. He hadn't even mentioned the furniture. He hadn't commented on the size of the house. He hadn't inspected anything. He was looking at the things that mattered to her. Daniel noticed the little details. A bowl by the door filled with keys. A stack of library books. A grocery list stuck to the refrigerator. A child's drawing held by a magnet, a small plant struggling near the window, and the yellow blanket. He pointed toward it. That's a great color. Emily smiled. I like yellow. I can tell. She laughed. Why? Because it's everywhere. She looked around. There was, in fact, more yellow than she realized. A flower, a mug, a small cushion. She laughed. I guess I have a theme. Daniel smiled. You have a personality. That sentence stayed with her. They ate dinner at the little dining table. Emily kept asking if everything was okay. Is the chicken cooked enough? Yes. Are the potatoes too salty? No. Do you want more? I've barely finished what's on my plate. Sorry. Daniel laughed. There it is again. What? You apologized. Emily smiled. I do that. I've noticed. She looked down. It's a bad habit. Who taught you? The question was gentle, but it hit hard. Emily became quiet. For several seconds, she didn't answer. Then she said, My ex-husband. Daniel didn't react dramatically. He simply waited. He used to criticize everything. Emily looked toward the kitchen. If the house wasn't perfect, he'd tell me. She smiled sadly. If dinner wasn't perfect, he'd tell me. She looked down at her hands. Eventually, I started apologizing before he even said anything. Daniel's expression softened. That sounds exhausting. It was. Why did you stay? Emily took a slow breath. Because I thought that was what marriage was. Daniel didn't interrupt. I thought if I worked harder, he'd become kinder. She laughed quietly. He never did. There was silence. Then Daniel said, Emily, can I tell you something? She looked up. Sure. I don't care if your house is perfect. She smiled. I know. No, I don't think you do. He looked around. I like this place. Why? Because it feels like you. Emily's eyes became wet. What does that mean? It means it doesn't feel staged. He pointed toward the photographs. You keep your memories where you can see them. Then the books. You read. Then the plants. You take care of things. Then the yellow blanket. You allow yourself comfort. Emily smiled through tears. And you apologize too much. She laughed. Daniel reached across the table. You don't have to impress me. Emily looked at his hand. Then she placed hers over it. For the first time that evening, her shoulders relaxed. She wasn't being evaluated. She wasn't being tested. She wasn't being compared to anyone. She was simply sitting at her own table with someone who seemed genuinely interested in knowing her, and that realization frightened her almost as much as it comforted her, because sometimes the hardest thing after leaving a painful relationship isn't learning how to be alone. It's learning how to believe that someone can enter your life without hurting you. That night after Daniel left, Emily stood in her doorway watching his car disappear down the street. She looked back at the house. The dishes were still on the table. The kitchen wasn't perfectly clean. The yellow blanket had fallen onto the floor, and for once she didn't rush to fix anything. She smiled. Then she whispered to herself, Maybe I don't have to be perfect anymore. She didn't know it yet, but Daniel had noticed something far more important than the house. He had noticed the woman who was slowly learning that she deserved to feel at home in her own life. The first things a man notices. When he walks into your home, most women have no idea. The next morning, Emily woke earlier than usual. Sunlight slipped through the bedroom curtains and landed across the floor. For a few seconds, she simply stared at the ceiling. Then she remembered the night before. Daniel had been in her home. He had sat at her dining table. He had seen her old furniture, her mismatched dishes, her family photographs, and all the little things she normally worried someone might judge. And somehow he had liked it. More importantly, he had liked her. Emily smiled. Then she remembered something else. He had noticed that she apologized too much. That bothered her. Not because he was wrong, because he was right. She had spent so many years apologizing that she hadn't realized how deeply the habit had become part of her. At work, she apologized when someone bumped into her. At the grocery store, she apologized if someone had to wait behind her. When a friend called unexpectedly, she apologized for being busy. When someone was rude, she sometimes apologized for reacting. It was as if she had learned that taking up space was dangerous. That morning, she decided to change one small thing. She would stop saying sorry when she had done nothing wrong. It sounded easy. It wasn't. By 9 o'clock, she had already failed twice. Her sister Rachel called. "Are you free for lunch?" "I think so." "Great, I'll pick you up." "Sorry, Emily stopped. Rachel laughed. "You were about to apologize, weren't you?" Emily sighed. "Yes." "Why?" "I don't know." Rachel became quiet. Then she said, "You know, I think Daniel is good for you." Emily smiled. "You barely know him." "I know you." That was enough to make Emily quiet. Rachel continued, "You've been different lately." "How?" "You're laughing more." Emily looked toward the yellow blanket on the couch. "Maybe." "No, definitely." After the call ended, Emily stood in her kitchen. She looked at the little house around her. She had spent years thinking a man would notice whether her home looked expensive. Now she was beginning to wonder whether the right man noticed something else entirely. Maybe he noticed whether the woman living there felt safe. Maybe he noticed whether she seemed comfortable. Maybe he noticed whether she was pretending. And maybe Daniel had noticed all of it. That thought made her smile. But later that afternoon, something happened that reminded Emily exactly why trusting someone was so difficult. She was leaving work when she saw Mark. He was standing beside his car across the parking lot. Emily stopped walking. Her stomach tightened. For a moment, she felt 14 years younger. She was back in the old kitchen, back in the old house, back in that life. Mark noticed her. He walked toward her. "Emily." She gripped her purse. "What are you doing here?" "I need to talk to you." "I don't think that's a good idea." He smiled. "You always were dramatic." The old sentence. The old tone. The same expression that used to make her question herself. Emily took a breath. "What do you want?" "I heard you're seeing someone." She stared at him. "That isn't your business." Mark's smile disappeared. "You've moved on quickly. It's been almost 2 years. You don't think that's disrespectful?" Emily almost laughed. "Disrespectful?" "Yes." She shook her head. "You don't get to decide who I date." Mark stepped closer. "You've changed." Emily looked at him. "Yes. I don't like it." For the first time, something inside her became still. She realized she didn't care. Not really. His opinion no longer had the power it once had. "You don't have to like it." She turned around. "Emily." She stopped. He said, "You'll regret this." She looked back. "Maybe." Then she walked away. Her hands were shaking. But she kept walking. She didn't call Daniel. She didn't call Rachel. She didn't tell anyone. She simply got into her car and drove home. When she arrived, she stood in the driveway for several minutes. She looked at the little house. Then she whispered, "He doesn't own this place." She walked inside. For the first time, she understood something. Mark's voice still lived in her head. But that didn't mean she had to listen to it. That evening, Daniel called. "How was your day?" Emily hesitated. "Strange." "What happened?" She told him. He listened. When she finished, he didn't immediately give advice. He simply said, "Are you safe?" "Yes." "Good." "I thought you'd be angry." "Why?" "Because he came to see me." Daniel's voice remained calm. "I don't get angry at you for someone else's behavior." Emily closed her eyes. That sentence meant more than he realized. Mark had always made her responsible for his emotions. If he was angry, it was her fault. If he was disappointed, it was her fault. If he was unhappy, it was her fault. Daniel wasn't doing that. He wasn't asking what she had done wrong. He was asking whether she was okay. That difference was enormous. "Daniel?" "Yes?" "Why are you so calm?" He laughed softly. "I'm not." "You sound calm." "I'm trying." Emily smiled. "Why?" "Because I don't want my fear to become your fear." She became silent. Then she said, "Can you come over?" There was no hesitation. "I'm on my way." 20 minutes later, Daniel knocked. Emily opened the door. He stepped inside. She expected him to ask questions. Instead, he looked at her. Do you want to talk? She shook her head. No. Okay. Can we just sit? Of course. They sat on the couch. No dramatic conversation. No speeches. No solutions. Just silence. After several minutes, Emily leaned against him. I used to think love meant someone would protect me from everything. Daniel looked at her. And now? I think maybe love means someone reminds you that you're strong enough to face things. He smiled. I think you're right. Emily looked around the room. The books. The photographs. The plants. The yellow blanket. Her home. Her life. Everything she had rebuilt. She realized something. Daniel hadn't rescued her. He had simply stood beside her while she learned to rescue herself. And perhaps that was the healthiest kind of love. A few days later, Daniel invited Emily to his house. She had never been there before. When she stepped inside, she immediately laughed. What? Daniel looked confused. Your house is messy. He looked around. There were books everywhere. A jacket hung over a chair. 2 coffee mugs sat on the counter. A pair of shoes was near the door. Okay, he said. Very messy. I'm embarrassed. No, you're not. He smiled. Maybe a little. Emily walked farther inside. Then she realized something. Daniel's home looked like him. Simple. Comfortable. A little disorganized. Nothing was staged. Nothing was designed to impress. There was a photograph of his father on the bookshelf. Emily stopped. That's him? Daniel nodded. Yes. He looks kind. He was. Emily looked at the photograph. Do you miss him? Every day. She didn't say anything. Daniel walked over. He loved this house. Emily smiled. Why? He said it was the only place where he didn't have to pretend. Emily looked at him. That sounds familiar. Daniel smiled. Maybe that's why I like yours. Because I don't pretend? Not anymore. She laughed. I'm still learning. So am I. They stood together in the quiet living room. Emily looked around. For the first time, she understood why Daniel had noticed her home differently. He knew what it meant to lose a place where you felt safe. He knew what it meant to turn a house into a refuge. He knew that comfort wasn't measured by money. It was measured by whether you could finally exhale. That evening, they cooked dinner together. They burned the vegetables. They laughed. They ordered pizza instead. Emily sat on the kitchen floor while Daniel searched for paper plates. She looked at him and laughed. What? She shook her head. Nothing. What? I just never thought I'd be happy like this. Daniel sat beside her. Like what? Like this. She gestured around. Not perfect. Daniel smiled. Good. Why good? Because perfect is exhausting. Emily laughed. Then Daniel reached for her hand. I'd rather have something real. Emily looked at him. And for the first time, she believed him. She didn't know what the future would bring. She didn't know whether their relationship would last. She didn't know whether she would ever completely stop hearing Mark's voice in her head. But she knew one thing. She was no longer trying to build a life that looked good to everyone else. She was building a life that felt good to her. And that was a beginning, a real one. The first things a man notices. When he walks into your home, most women have no idea. 3 weeks passed, and Emily began noticing something she had never expected. Daniel wasn't simply becoming part of her life. He was becoming part of her home. At first, it happened in tiny ways. His favorite coffee mug appeared beside hers. A pair of his shoes stayed near the front door. He left a book on the coffee table one evening and forgot to take it home. Then another book appeared. Then a jacket. One Saturday morning, Emily looked around the living room and realized that Daniel had slowly started leaving pieces of himself behind. She smiled. But then she caught herself thinking something old. Is the house clean enough for him? She immediately stopped. That question belonged to another life. She didn't want to become the woman who constantly cleaned because she was afraid someone would criticize her. So she left the dishes in the sink. She left the blanket on the couch. She made coffee. And when Daniel arrived, she opened the door wearing an old sweatshirt and jeans. He smiled. Morning. Morning. He looked at her. You look comfortable. I am. Good. He kissed her forehead and walked inside. He didn't look around. He didn't inspect anything. He simply put his keys on the little bowl by the door. Emily watched him. That small action made her strangely emotional. He had done it without asking. As if the bowl belonged to him too. As if the house was becoming theirs. Later that morning, they sat on the porch. Daniel drank coffee while Emily watered the plants. You know, he said, I think your basil is finally going to survive. Emily looked at the plant. Don't say that. Why? You'll jinx it. He laughed. You've been taking care of it for 6 months. And it's still barely alive. That's impressive. She smiled. Then Daniel became quiet. Emily noticed. What? Nothing. You're doing that thing again. What thing? Thinking. He smiled. I got a call from my mother. Is everything okay? She's fine. He paused. She asked about you? Emily smiled. What did you tell her? That you're wonderful. Emily looked down. That sounds dangerous? Why? Because then she'll expect me to actually be wonderful. Daniel laughed. She already likes you. How do you know? She asked if you're coming to Thanksgiving. Emily looked up. Thanksgiving? Yeah. With your family? Yes. She smiled. Then her expression changed. I've never met your whole family. You'll be fine. What if they don't like me? Daniel looked at her. Emily? What? Why do you always assume people are waiting to dislike you? She didn't answer. Because she knew the answer. Years of criticism had trained her to expect rejection before acceptance. Daniel reached over and took her hand. You don't have to win anyone over. But what if you're coming as yourself? She smiled. That sounds terrifying. Then we'll be terrified together. She laughed. And that was one of the things she loved most about him. He never promised that nothing difficult would happen. He simply promised she wouldn't face it alone. Thanksgiving arrived faster than Emily expected. She spent the morning getting ready. She chose a simple blue dress. She checked herself in the mirror. Then she changed it. Then changed back. She walked downstairs. Daniel was waiting in the living room. You look beautiful. Really? Really? Not too much? No. Not too simple? No. She sighed. You're very difficult to argue with. It's one of my best qualities. She laughed. They drove to his mother's house. Emily watched the scenery through the passenger window. What if they ask about Mark? They won't. How do you know? Because I've told them you're my future. Emily turned toward him. Future? Daniel glanced at her. Did I say that? Yes. He smiled. I meant it. Her heart skipped. She looked back out the window. She didn't know what to say. When they arrived, the house was full. People were laughing. Children were running through the hallway. The smell of turkey filled the air. Daniel's mother hugged Emily immediately. I've been waiting to meet you again. Emily smiled. Again? I've already heard so much about you. Daniel looked embarrassed. Mom! What? You're embarrassing me. His mother laughed. You'll survive. Emily relaxed. Then she noticed something. Nobody was inspecting her. Nobody cared about her dress. Nobody was judging her. They were simply happy she was there. A few hours later, she found herself laughing with Daniel's sister in the kitchen. Daniel walked in. He stopped. He watched her. Emily didn't notice. She was laughing so hard she had tears in her eyes. Daniel smiled. His mother stood beside him. You love her, she whispered. Daniel nodded. I do. His mother smiled. She makes you happy. Daniel looked at Emily. She makes me feel at home. His mother squeezed his arm. Then don't let fear ruin what love built. Daniel nodded. Later that night, Emily and Daniel returned home. She kicked off her shoes. I'm exhausted. Good exhausted? Very. She walked toward the kitchen. Then she stopped. There was a small envelope on the counter. What is this? Daniel looked confused. I don't know. Emily picked it up. Her name was written on the front. She opened it. Inside was a letter. The handwriting was familiar. her grandmother's. Emily's breath caught. She sat down. Daniel came closer. Where did that come from? I don't know. She unfolded the paper. The letter was short. Emily, if you're reading this, you've probably finally built the home I always wanted for you. Not a perfect home. A peaceful one. Remember that there is a difference. Emily's eyes filled with tears. She continued, never choose someone because they make your house look beautiful. Choose someone who makes your life feel safe. The right person won't be impressed by your furniture. They'll notice your heart. Emily covered her mouth. Daniel sat beside her. That small action made her strangely emotional. He had done it without asking. As if the bowl belonged to him too. As if the house was becoming theirs. Later that morning, they sat on the porch. Daniel drank coffee while Emily watered the plants. You know, he said, I think your basil is finally going to survive. Emily looked at the plant. Don't say that. Why? You'll jinx it. He laughed. You've been taking care of it for 6 months. And it's still barely alive. That's impressive. She smiled. Then Daniel became quiet. Emily noticed. What? Nothing. You're doing that thing again. What thing? Thinking. He smiled. I got a call from my mother. Is everything okay? She's fine. He paused. She asked about you? Emily smiled. What did you tell her? That you're wonderful. Emily looked down. That sounds dangerous. Why? Because then she'll expect me to actually be wonderful. Daniel laughed. She already likes you. How do you know? She asked if you're coming to Thanksgiving. Emily looked up. Thanksgiving? Yeah. With your family? Yes. She smiled. Then her expression changed. I've never met your whole family. You'll be fine. What if they don't like me? Daniel looked at her. Emily? What? Why do you always assume people are waiting to dislike you? She didn't answer. Because she knew the answer. Years of criticism had trained her to expect rejection before acceptance. Daniel reached over and took her hand. You don't have to win anyone over. But what if you're coming as yourself? She smiled. That sounds terrifying. Then we'll be terrified together. She laughed. And that was one of the things she loved most about him. He never promised that nothing difficult would happen. He simply promised she wouldn't face it alone. Thanksgiving arrived faster than Emily expected. She spent the morning getting ready. She chose a simple blue dress. She checked herself in the mirror. Then she changed it. Then changed back. She walked downstairs. Daniel was waiting in the living room. You look beautiful. Really? Really? Not too much? No. Not too simple? No. She sighed. You're very difficult to argue with. It's one of my best qualities. She laughed. They drove to his mother's house. Emily watched the scenery through the passenger window. What if they ask about Mark? They won't. How do you know? Because I've told them you're my future. Emily turned toward him. Future? Daniel glanced at her. Did I say that? Yes. He smiled. I meant it. Her heart skipped. She looked back out the window. She didn't know what to say. When they arrived, the house was full. People were laughing. Children were running through the hallway. The smell of turkey filled the air. Daniel's mother hugged Emily immediately. I've been waiting to meet you again. Emily smiled. Again? I've already heard so much about you. Daniel looked embarrassed. Mom! What? You're embarrassing me. His mother laughed. You'll survive. Emily relaxed. Then she noticed something. Nobody was inspecting her. Nobody cared about her dress. Nobody was judging her. They were simply happy she was there. A few hours later, she found herself laughing with Daniel's sister in the kitchen. Daniel walked in. He stopped. He watched her. Emily didn't notice. She was laughing so hard she had tears in her eyes. Daniel smiled. His mother stood beside him. You love her, she whispered. Daniel nodded. I do. His mother smiled. She makes you happy. Daniel looked at Emily. She makes me feel at home. His mother squeezed his arm. Then don't let fear ruin what love built. Daniel nodded. Later that night, Emily and Daniel returned home. She kicked off her shoes. I'm exhausted. Good exhausted? Very. She walked toward the kitchen. Then she stopped. There was a small envelope on the counter. What is this? Daniel looked confused. I don't know. Emily picked it up. Her name was written on the front. She opened it. Inside was a letter. The handwriting was familiar. Her grandmother's. Emily's breath caught. She sat down. Daniel came closer. Where did that come from? I don't know. She unfolded the paper. The letter was short. Emily, if you're reading this, you've probably finally built the home I always wanted for you. Not a perfect home. A peaceful one. Remember that there is a difference. Emily's eyes filled with tears. She continued, never choose someone because they make your house look beautiful. Choose someone who makes your life feel safe. The right person won't be impressed by your furniture. They'll notice your heart. Emily covered her mouth. Daniel sat beside her. She kept reading. And when someone walks into your home, pay attention to how you feel. Do you become nervous? Do you start apologizing? Do you feel like you have to perform? Or can you breathe? The final line was simple. The person who lets you breathe is the person worth keeping. Emily lowered the letter. For several seconds, she couldn't speak. Daniel looked at her. What does it say? She handed him the letter. He read it. Then he looked at her. She knew. Emily nodded. She always did. Daniel took her hand. Emily looked around the room. Her grandmother's letter. The yellow blanket. The photographs. The plants. The books. Everything was exactly where she wanted it. And suddenly she understood something. Her grandmother had never been talking about a house. She had been talking about a life where Emily didn't have to earn her place, a life where she could be loved without performing, a life where she could open the front door without wondering whether the person entering would make her feel smaller. Daniel folded the letter carefully. I think she would like you. Emily smiled. She would like you too. I hope so. She would. He looked at her. How do you know? Emily smiled. Because you make me breathe. Daniel pulled her into his arms. She closed her eyes. For the first time in years, she wasn't waiting for something to go wrong. She wasn't preparing for criticism. She wasn't measuring herself against anyone. She was simply there. Safe. Loved. Home. But neither of them knew that the peace they'd found was about to be tested. Because the next morning, Emily received a message that would bring the past directly back to her front door. The message contained only 6 words. We need to talk about the house. And beneath it was Mark's name. Emily stared at the screen. Her hands began to shake. Daniel noticed immediately. What happened? She looked up. For the first time in months, the peaceful little house suddenly felt like it was holding its breath. Emily whispered, Mark is back. The first things a man notices when he walks into your home, most women have no idea. Emily stared at the message on her phone. We need to talk about the house. Underneath it was Mark's name. For several seconds, she couldn't move. The room suddenly felt colder. Daniel noticed the change in her face. What happened? Emily slowly handed him the phone. He read the message. Then he looked at her. Do you want to respond? I don't know. Then don't respond yet. Emily stood and walked toward the window. Outside, everything looked normal. A neighbor was walking a dog. A delivery truck passed by. The trees moved gently in the wind. But inside Emily's mind, everything had changed. He knows where I live, she whispered. Daniel stood behind her. He knows the address. He knows everything. No, Emily turned. He knows the house. He knows my finances. He knows where I work. He knows how to scare me. Daniel's voice remained calm. He knows who you used to be. Emily stared at him. You're not that person anymore. She wanted to believe him. But fear doesn't disappear simply because someone gives you a logical reason to stop being afraid. For years, Mark had made her feel as if she couldn't survive without him. Now, even though she had her own job, her own home, her own money, and her own life, one message had brought the old fear rushing back. That afternoon, Emily contacted her attorney. There had been an old financial arrangement connected to the house they had, owned during their marriage. Emily had assumed everything was finished. Her attorney reviewed the documents. After nearly an hour, she called Emily back. "Don't panic." Emily's heart raced. "That's not very reassuring." Her attorney laughed gently. "I mean it. From what I'm seeing, Mark doesn't have a legal claim to your current home." Emily closed her eyes. "Are you sure?" "Yes." "What does he want then?" "Probably leverage." Emily swallowed. "Can he do anything?" "Not legally based on these documents." Emily thanked her and ended the call. She felt relieved. But not completely, because sometimes knowing you're safe and feeling safe are two different things. That evening, Daniel came over. Emily told him everything. He listened. Then he asked, "Do you want me to stay tonight?" Emily looked at him. "Yes." So he stayed. They didn't discuss Mark again. Instead, they cooked pasta. They watched an old comedy. They argued about which movie was better. They laughed. For a few hours, Emily forgot about the message. Then, at 11:30, someone knocked on the front door. Emily froze. Daniel stood immediately. "Stay here." He walked toward the door. Emily's heart pounded. Daniel looked through the window. Then he turned. "It's your sister." Emily exhaled. Rachel entered carrying 2 grocery bags. "I brought ice cream." She looked at Emily. "Why do you look like you've seen a ghost?" Emily explained. Rachel listened. Then she hugged her. "You're not alone." Emily nodded. "I know." Rachel looked toward Daniel. "He's staying?" "Yes." "Good." They ate ice cream in the kitchen. For the first time that night, Emily laughed. The following morning, she woke with a strange sense of determination. She went downstairs. She looked at the wooden sign above the doorway. "You belong here." She touched it. Then she whispered, "I do." That sentence felt different now. Not hopeful. Certain. She made coffee. She opened the curtains. She let the sunlight into every room. And then she did something she hadn't done in years. She stopped being afraid of what someone else might think. 2 days later, Mark arrived. He stood outside the front door. Emily saw him through the window. Her first instinct was to hide. Her second was to call Daniel. But then she remembered something. She didn't need someone else to speak for her. She opened the door. Mark looked surprised. "Emily, what do you want?" "I told you we needed to talk." "We're talking." He looked past her. "Can I come in?" "No." His expression hardened. "You used to invite me in. This isn't your home anymore." He stared at her. Then he laughed. "You really think this little house makes you independent?" Emily's hands trembled. But she didn't step back. "This house doesn't make me independent." She looked directly at him. "I am." Mark's expression changed. "You've become arrogant." "No." Emily shook her head. "I've become honest." He stepped closer. "You're making a mistake. I made my mistake years ago." "What mistake?" "Thinking I needed your approval." Mark said nothing. Emily continued. "You made me believe that everything I did was wrong." "I was trying to help you." "You were trying to control me." He laughed. "You always exaggerate." Emily felt the old anger rising. But this time she didn't suppress it. "You know what I remember?" Mark crossed his arms. "What?" "I remember cleaning this house for hours while you told me it wasn't good enough." She paused. "I remember cooking meals you didn't appreciate." Another pause. "I remember changing things because you didn't like them." She looked around her little home. "And I remember forgetting what I liked." Mark's face became unreadable. Emily took a breath. "But I remember now." "What?" "What I like." She looked at the yellow blanket. "I like yellow." She looked at her photographs. "I like family." She looked at her plants. "I like growing things." Then she looked at Mark. "And I like peace." Mark stared at her. "You're really going to throw away everything we built?" Emily's voice softened. "We didn't build it together." He looked confused. "I built it." Mark laughed. "You?" "Yes." She paused. "You just lived there." For the first time, Mark had nothing to say. Emily closed the door. She locked it. Then she leaned against it. Her knees were shaking. Daniel walked into the hallway. He had been in the kitchen. He didn't ask what happened. He simply held her. Emily cried. Not because she was weak, because she had finally said everything she had been too afraid to say. I did it, she whispered. Daniel smiled. You did? I thought I'd be terrified forever. You weren't. I was. But you still did it. Emily looked at him. Thank you. For what? For staying. Daniel shook his head. I didn't do it for you. What do you mean? You did it. He touched her cheek. I just reminded you that you could. Those words stayed with Emily. Months passed. The legal matter with Mark was resolved. He had no claim against her home, no control over her finances, no reason to contact her again. Slowly, his messages stopped. His visits stopped. His presence faded. And Emily discovered something surprising. She had spent years thinking freedom would feel dramatic. She expected fireworks, a huge celebration, some powerful moment when she would finally feel completely free. Instead, freedom arrived quietly. It looked like drinking coffee in her kitchen without fear. It looked like leaving dishes in the sink. It looked like buying flowers because she liked them. It looked like laughing loudly. It looked like inviting friends over without cleaning for 6 hours first. It looked like Daniel walking through the front door and saying, I'm home. One evening, nearly a year after their first dinner together, Daniel came through the door carrying a small wooden box. Emily looked at him. What is that? I found it at an antique store. She opened it. Inside was a small brass key. What is this? A key. To what? Daniel smiled. I thought you knew. She looked at him. He took her hand. To our future. Emily's eyes filled. Daniel, I've been thinking. That sounds dangerous. He laughed. I want to ask you something. She knew. Her heart began beating faster. Daniel reached into his pocket. He pulled out a ring. I know you don't need someone to save you. Emily started crying. And I don't want to be your rescuer. He smiled. I want to be your partner. He took her hand. I want the ordinary days. Emily laughed through tears. I want the grocery trips. She smiled. I want the arguments about what movie to watch. She laughed. I want the burnt pancakes. No. Yes. Those are terrible. I know. Daniel smiled. I want the messy kitchen. Emily laughed. I want the dog hair. We don't have a dog. We'll get one. She laughed harder. I want your family. He paused. And I want you to know that you will never have to earn your place beside me. Emily covered her mouth. Will you marry me? She looked around the house. The old couch, the yellow blanket, the photographs, the plants, the little wooden sign. Everything that had once represented her fear now represented her freedom. Yes, she whispered. Daniel smiled. Yes? Yes? He placed the ring on her finger. Emily looked at it. Then she looked at him. I love you. I love you too. They hugged. And that night, they sat on the floor of the living room eating takeout because neither of them felt like cooking. Emily looked around. Nothing was perfect. The coffee table was covered with papers. The kitchen had dishes. The blanket was on the floor. Daniel's shoes were by the couch. And Emily smiled. This is my favorite version of this house. Daniel looked at her. Why? Because nobody is trying to impress anyone. He smiled. Exactly. A year later, they married in the backyard. There were no expensive decorations, no giant ballroom, no elaborate display, just family, friends, flowers, music, and string lights. Emily wore a simple dress. Daniel wore a dark suit. Before the ceremony, Emily stood alone inside the house. She looked at her grandmother's photograph. I finally did it, she whispered. She touched the picture. I built a home. Then she looked toward the doorway. Daniel was standing there. He smiled. You ready? Emily nodded. Yes. They walked outside together. As Emily reached him, Daniel whispered, You look beautiful. She smiled. You don't have to say that. I know. They laughed. Then the ceremony began. Emily's grandmother's. Letter sat safely inside the wooden box near the front row. After the vows, Emily looked at Daniel. I used to think a home was something you showed people. Daniel squeezed her hands. And now? Now I think it's something you feel. He smiled. Years later, Emily would tell the story to her niece. Her niece once asked, "What does a man notice when he walks into a woman's home?" Emily smiled. Different men notice different things. Like what? Some notice the furniture. Some notice whether it's clean. Some notice how expensive everything looks. Her niece nodded. But the right man? Emily paused. The right man notices how you feel. Her niece frowned. What do you mean? Emily smiled. He notices whether you seem relaxed, whether you laugh naturally, whether you apologize too much, whether you hide things you love because you're afraid they'll be judged, whether your home feels like a place where you can breathe. Her niece thought about that. So that's what matters? Emily nodded. More than you think. She looked around her house. The yellow blanket was still there. It had faded over the years. The corners were worn, but Emily refused to replace it. Daniel had once joked that it was older than some of their furniture. She loved it, because it reminded her of the woman she used to be. The woman who thought she had to earn love. The woman who apologized for everything. The woman who believed a perfect home could protect her from rejection. The woman who watched every person's face, searching for judgment. That woman was still part of her, but she no longer controlled her. Emily had learned that a home doesn't become beautiful because everything inside it is expensive. It becomes beautiful when the people inside it feel safe. And love isn't proven by how much someone admires your life from the outside. It's proven by how peaceful you feel when the door closes, and you're finally alone with them. Years after the first night Daniel entered Emily's house, they sat together on the porch during a summer evening. The sun was setting. Their dog slept near their feet. The garden was full of flowers. Daniel held Emily's hand. You know what I noticed when I first walked into your house? Emily smiled. You've told me 100 times. I'll tell you again. What? I noticed you were watching me. She laughed. And? I noticed you were waiting for me to judge you. She became quiet. And then? Daniel looked at her. I noticed you were trying so hard to be enough. Emily looked down. And now? He squeezed her hand. Now I notice that you don't care anymore. She smiled. I care. About what? That the people I love are happy. Daniel nodded. That's different. How? You don't need their approval anymore. Emily looked at the house. No, she smiled. I don't. Then she leaned against his shoulder. The house behind them wasn't perfect. There were dishes in the sink, laundry waiting upstairs, a toy under the couch, a few weeds in the garden, but Emily didn't care. She had finally understood something her grandmother had tried to teach her years earlier. A house doesn't need to be perfect. A relationship doesn't need to be perfect. A person doesn't need to be perfect. What matters is whether you can breathe, whether you can speak, whether you can laugh, whether you can make mistakes without fearing punishment, whether you can come home after the hardest day of your life and know that someone will still open the door. Daniel kissed her forehead. You okay? Emily smiled. I'm home. And this time she wasn't talking about the house. She was talking about him. She was talking about herself. She was talking about the life she had finally chosen. A life where she didn't need permission. A life where she didn't have to perform. A life where love didn't feel like a test. A life where she could finally breathe. And perhaps that is the thing people misunderstand most about love. The right person doesn't necessarily walk into your home and notice whether everything is spotless. They notice whether your eyes soften when you see them. They notice whether you laugh without thinking. They notice whether you feel safe enough to be imperfect. They notice the little things that reveal who you really are. And when they love you, they don't ask you to become someone else. They simply make it easier for you to become yourself. Emily spent years believing she needed a perfect home to be worthy of love. In the end, she discovered the opposite. She didn't need a perfect home. She needed a peaceful one. She didn't need a perfect man. She needed a kind one. She didn't need someone to rescue her. She needed someone who respected her strength. And she didn't need to become perfect. She only needed to stop apologizing for being human. The little house outside Columbus eventually became much more than a house. It became the place where Emily learned to trust again, the place where she learned to laugh again, the place where she learned to love again. And most importantly, the place where she finally learned that she belonged. If this story touched your heart, remember, the right person won't make you feel like you have to perform for love. They'll make you feel safe enough to be yourself.